Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about going back to school. And this year is different from all of the other years that any of us have experienced because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And there are a lot of emotions that we are experiencing, that our children and our teens are experiencing. And so I want to talk about those today. So, first we're going to talk about some emotions and some tips, and then I want to talk about things to watch out for so that you can know if your teen is struggling, as well as some things that you can watch out for to know whether or not your teen is healing. So let's start first with grief. So all of us are definitely grieving. We are grieving what was supposed to be. We are grieving the loss that all of us have experienced the past 5 months. We're grieving for those who have lost family members. We're grieving for teachers. There are a lot of things that might be causing grief in both us and our teens. I have a quote here. It says, "Teens grieve deeply but often work very hard to hide their feelings. Fearing the vulnerability that comes with expression, they look for distractions rather than staying with the grief process long enough to find real relief. Feelings can be turned off quickly, much like flipping a light switch. Teens can act as if nothing has happened while they're breaking up inside. You may observe teens who take on the role of a caregiver to family members or friends, in effect denying their own grief." So that's about teens. I think as parents, we experience grief sometimes the same way. I know that I have gone from, hey, it's going to be okay, to I'm feeling really sad about this, to this feels really different, and I'm sad that we're not as excited going and shopping for our pencils. And there's so many things that are different that it's okay to grieve the loss of the way that things were. Here's a couple tips for dealing with the grief. The first is to feel it and name it. Talk about it with your teen. They might hide from it. They might feel vulnerable. They might switch it on and off, and sometimes it can be hard to tell exactly how our teens are feeling, especially if you have a teen son. They tend to hide grief even more than teen daughters do. Another thing is to try to let go of "it was supposed to." So I found myself thinking this a lot and saying this, and it's not very helpful. Everything is happening exactly the way that it quote unquote was supposed to. We just didn't know it. We didn't know that this year was going to be different. But hanging on to the thought, it was supposed to be like this. My ninth grade son was supposed to be excited with all of his friends. My senior was supposed to be starting her senior year this way. It was supposed to. It was supposed to. Because that's not accurate. We just didn't know that it was supposed to be this way. And so holding on to the past and holding on to these beliefs is not going to be effective for us or our teens, and it's going to be hard for us to really embrace this year if we're held up in "it was supposed to be this way." So watch out for those articles, watch out for those people talking like that. I mean, it's okay to grieve, but try and let go of the quote unquote "it was supposed to be different than it is." Finally, remember that grief is ongoing. It can ebb and flow. I think a lot of us, our summer was fairly normal-ish. I mean, there definitely were some things that were different, but we weren't constantly having things canceled like we were in March. And so some of that grief is coming back up for us because we've settled into a new normal, and now with school starting back up, there are a lot of things that are different that we're going to maybe need to grieve and be sad about for a little while as we move into the school year. All right, the second thing I want to talk about is fear. So fear is definitely one we've all become very well acquainted with the past 5 months. Fear tends to be anticipatory, so it's looking into things that might happen in the future. It sometimes can come along with worry and anxiety of we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, are the numbers going to skyrocket? What's going to happen when the kids go back to school? How many kids are going to get sick? Are they going to take it home? Is it going to spread? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely a lot of fear that all of us are experiencing. And so here's a few tips for fear. One is to look at the worst case scenario. Sometimes we're afraid to do this. We think that looking at the worst case scenario is just going to make things worse. But in reality, sitting down and thinking through the worst case scenario and planning for it can help release some of that fear. And so what is your worst case scenario? Is your worst case scenario your teen gets it and dies? Is it that they get it and bring it home? Is death the worst case scenario for you? Or do you feel like, that's probably not going to happen? I'm afraid this. I'm afraid schools are going to shut back down. I'm afraid my teen is going to block, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the worst case scenario for you that you really think is going to happen? What are you really afraid of? And recognize it, name it, plan like it will happen. Plan what you would do if that happened, and then do your best to let it go. So if it pops up again, say, I've already thought through that. I already know what I'm going to do if that happens, and let it go. Another one is recognize that fear is always in the car. part of being human is driving fear around. Like, it's always there. There's always a fear of something. The trick is to not let it be the driver. Occasionally, it might need to be shotgun, but even then, fear isn't always the best person to be telling you where to go or how to act. It's best if it's in the backseat. So if you can just kind of picture the fear of school starting and be like, okay, you're with me, fear, we're here, we're doing this, but just get in the back. You don't need to be directing my decisions. I don't want to live in fear. Another thing is to, ask if there's a purpose for your fear. Sometimes fear pops up when in reality, it's not really warning you of anything. It's just habit, or other people's fear is contagious. We're going to talk about that in the group this week. So just kind of be aware that if there's no purpose for it, then you need to try and really work harder to let it go. Be compassionate with yourself and others, and then finally try to move to curiosity. So when you're curious, fear is often not there, or it's very minimal. And so I'm curious what this year is going to bring. I'm curious, hey, teen, what do you think is going to happen this year? What do you think your ninth grade year is going to be like? Like, just be curious as things happen. Oh, that happened. Oh, that's curious. I wonder how we're going to react to that. I wonder how the teachers are going to handle that, etc. All right, and the next one I would talk about, this kind of goes along with fear, is resistance. So I have experienced a lot of resistance with school. So resistance is essentially internally arguing with yourself or with the circumstances. So it's resisting what is really happening. And it's important to think, what is it that you're resisting? We're resisting things being different. We're resisting having to wear masks. We're resisting our kids going back half time. We're resisting all of these different things and essentially arguing with ourselves. Well, what if it wasn't this way? What if it didn't need to be this way? What if this isn't the right thing? It's just that internal monologue of just resistance of we don't want it to be this way. And so we try and bargain. We try and think through things in a different way. It's dirty pain. It's ineffective. It doesn't get you anywhere. You can't change a lot of these things. We'll talk about that more in a second. And so try and kind of picture, like if you think of bamboo kind of waving, it doesn't resist the wind. It doesn't resist the water. It's flexible. There's a lot of things that we can learn this year if we kind of let go of that resistance and just go with the flow. The final thing I want to talk about is uncertainty. So this is another one. It kind of goes along with the resistance and with the fear. Massive amount of uncertainty. And as humans, we get used to things being a certain way. And when big things come along that change it, it obviously feels very uncomfortable. Just a couple tips for this one. I don't want this to get too long. Is to really watch the stories that you about that as well. What are you telling yourself about this? Are you trying to predict the future? How are you twisting this when you're thinking about it? How is your team twisting it? Are you looking at it in a positive way, in a neutral way, in a negative way? Just really watch your thoughts and the stories that you're telling. Number 2 is to find things that you are certain about and discuss them often. When we get stuck in uncertainty, we tend to spiral and just stay there. And so things that you do know and that you are certain of and things that you can control can be very effective. Finally, take control of the small things. Take control of your routine. Take control of your daily habits. Help your team take control of theirs. Take control of the way that you talk about things. Take control of your emotions. Take control of your eating, your diet. Anyway, just look at other things that you can control and focus on those instead of the things that you can't control. So I just kind of want to quickly now go through some signs that your teen is struggling with grief, fear, or anger. Sometimes they will tell you outright, but a lot of times they won't. Sometimes they don't even know what they're feeling. So here is a pretty decent list of some things that you can watch out for to know how your teen is doing. Lack of concentration, shock, avoidance or retreat, constant thoughts of just getting of loss or sadness or kind of obsessing over things being different. Jealousy aimed at other people, anger, self-blame, confusion, feeling disoriented, feeling in a fog, nervous, irritable, declining grades, loss of interest in their usual activities, being too busy, trying to block out pain, wanting to be alone more than usual, a little tricky with teens, some like to be more alone than others, deep sadness, drug or alcohol use, vaping, eating too much or too little, risk-taking behavior, being self-destructive, antisocial, self-harming, unsafe or unwanted sexual activity, or other manifestations of grief like upset stomachs, headaches, fatigue, stuff like that. So those are just some of the symptoms that you can just start watching out for your teen. Really anything that's different from how they were in the past. I mean, teens do change a lot, and so it doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong. But if your mom gut is saying something is not going on right, please seek help from somebody. Healing in your teen. So this is a positive side. This is what healing might look like in your teen. They're starting to reorganize their life. They're gaining new insights, learning new schools. They start to feel more hopeful. They start to reinvest their energy into doing things that are meaningful. They might feel peace with the past. They can be quiet and don't monopolize conversations. They seem at peace with themselves. They, you might feel like they have some inner strength. They're seeming stronger. They have increased empathy for other people. They have a feeling of well-being. They seem a little more confident in their future, and they are reconnecting with people. They're problem solving. They're seeking help when they need it, and they have hope for the future, hope for their school year. So those are just some of those signs of when to be concerned, as well as when to start to feel hope again and to know that your teen is overcoming this, that they're starting to do well. Here's just in conclusion a couple tips for helping your teen get through this new school year. 1, acknowledge their presence, their importance, their opinions, their thoughts, and their feelings. So give them a little bit of extra attention. Be patient and open-minded. They may not handle this the way that you do, and so just be aware that they might grieve in their own way. Be available, sit with them, listen to them, answer their questions. Let them know that a large range of emotions is normal. Validate their feelings and don't minimize them. Check in with other adults in their lives, their teachers, their coaches, church leaders. Just kind of be aware of what's going on. Teach them appropriate ways of handling emotion. In my files section, I've got a list of 50 ways of handling emotions, and maybe print that out, put it on your fridge. Watch for those physical effects I mentioned, headaches, stomach aches, fatigue, that sort of thing, as well as if their eating changes, things like that. Model stress management techniques, set realistic expectations, avoid trying to predict the future, give them physical outlets where appropriate, especially if they're doing a lot of online school, help them identify their needs, and allow them to use distractions, but in a healthy way. So it's okay if they want to distract themselves, but don't allow them to just have those distractions just completely take over. So you want them to be able to distract when they need to, but not buffer and avoid feeling those emotions. So the final thing I want to say for all of us is we need to all find meaning and purpose in what is going on. Find the good. Look for blessings and for positive things. Don't do this in a toxic way where you're avoiding negative emotion, but we do get to choose the story that we tell about this. And this is a great adventure. This is going to be an awesome story now. It's going to be an awesome story someday for our kids to tell. Hey, the year that they started school in the middle of the pandemic and we wore masks, and like there's a lot of ways to kind of twist this and to think about it, and to just really how we interpret it is going to really affect how the year goes for us and for our teens. So thanks for joining in. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will see you later.